Now, to be clear, simply being on a flight linked to Jeffrey Epstein doesn't automatically prove anything, but context matters, because when you start hearing accounts tied to those same flights, it changes how people look at the situation. In a 2015 segment by Inside Edition, a former flight attendant described what she claimed to have witnessed aboard Epstein's private jet, saying that young girls were frequently present during trips involving high-profile passengers, and that's where the concern deepens. Multiple testimonies from crew members have been cited in discussions around who was on board during certain flights, including reference
the Illuminati. Find out what the fuck they got going on. Get the information. Run back to y'all. Tell y'all everything I know. That's my motherfucking job. But I don't know how many more times I'm gonna be able to sneak in there. Thanks to Shannon Sharp and 90 million views, I can't sneak very often. So while I was in there this last time, knowing that my last report might be my last report, I went in there and I got information for everybody. Look at my white friends. Us too? That's right, white secrets.
Hollywood elites have tried.
They didn't just try to ignore Katt Williams, they tried to control him. Behind closed doors, the offers kept coming. Money, influence, access to elite circles, even roles in massive blockbuster films. On the surface, it looked like opportunity, but according to Katt, every offer came with invisible conditions. And he wasn't willing to play along. In his conversation with Theo Von, he opened up about a moment that genuinely shook him, realizing just how far the power of Harvey Weinstein actually reached. What shocked him most? The claim that Weinstein could offer access to virtually any actress in the industry. And that's where things take a darker turn, because at that level, it stops being opportunity and starts looking like control. The moment Katt Williams proved he couldn't be controlled, everything flipped. Suddenly, doors started closing, deals disappeared, and his image completely twisted in the public eye. According to Katt, the fallout wasn't random, it was calculated. He claims he even lost major contracts because he refused to take on roles that didn't align with his personal boundaries, including being... And here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't just about one comedian. This is how power can operate in Hollywood. Once you're locked into those massive contracts, this is where it stops being about career and turns deeply personal. According to Katt Williams, the pressure didn't just stay in the industry, it followed him home. When he refused to fall in line, he says the situation escalated, with actions that impacted his family life. He was suddenly painted as a threat to his own children, forced into a long, exhausting legal battle just to maintain access to them. At that point, it's no longer about fame or success. It's about survival.
No, this is their 9th time coming to my house. The problem was this time they came to my office and took my kids from an office. Not from my house, from an office. So now when I can't have my kids at my office,
that's an issue.
I must be the most terrible black dude. Because here's the whole thing. You gonna charge me with child endangerment? After I adopted 7 children and had them for 14 years in this state? Really? You coming after my kids now? Because it was already a witch hunt. Now you want my babies? Yikes.
And if this all feels familiar, that's because we've heard a version of this story before. Think about Wendy Williams, someone who spoke boldly, asked uncomfortable questions, and didn't filter her opinions to please anyone. She openly discussed what she believed was a shift happening inside Hollywood, even calling out powerful figures like Sean Combs. Wendy talked about image control, about performers being pushed into certain identities, and about how the culture of hip-hop was changing in ways many didn't want to admit. She even revisited long-standing rumors about hidden identities in rap, saying this wasn't anything new. It had been there for decades. But here's where it gets intense. Wendy claimed she faced serious backlash for speaking too openly, including losing opportunities after attempting to expose things others wanted buried. And once again, the pattern shows up. Speak too loudly, and suddenly, everything starts...
Right, well, Kanye had the kilt, and then ASAP had the long dress.
Yeah.
Have you seen the ASAP picture?
Yeah, I'm not down with any of that. I mean, wouldn't be my man.
No?
No.
We brought in Lord Jamar from Brand Nubian because he had made some comments about that.
What did he say?
Well, he talked about the whole feminization of hip hop culture from the 80s on.
I think he's taking the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about how when we were younger, you would wear an earring in your left ear, and that was considered straight, and the earring in your right ear, that would be gay, and then at one point, people started wearing both earrings, and and
then they started wearing girl pants, and then they're wearing jeggings, and then, yes, it's very effeminized, but be very clear, there were lots of homosexuals in hip-hop back in the 80s, too, that was what's worse, hip-hop wearing skirts or hip-hop being closeted and having a plethora of kids to prove manhood that, and denial of something that you shouldn't have to deny, which is your sexuality. Mm-hmm. So I hear what Jamar is saying, but we come from a very homosexual era of hip-hop as well. There was a radio personality once upon a time. Her name was Wendy Williams, and she was practically burned at the stake for talking about such. And now it's all come full circle.
And then things took an even darker turn. Not long after those moments, Wendy Williams was suddenly hit with serious health claims, including reports about cognitive decline. Almost overnight, she was pulled away from the spotlight and distanced from the industry that once revolved around her. What raised eyebrows, though, were the circumstances. Her time spent under strict supervision, heavy medical treatment, and limited control over her own life. Now, questions are resurfacing. Was this truly about her health, or something else entirely? Because if even
a series of depositions that not only prove that she's being held against her will, but also threaten to dismantle the Hollywood paedophile ring's sinister web of coercion and control. We've got the tapes, and they're shocking. It's clear that Wendy is currently living in fear for her life. They're locking up a mentally stable woman who holds incriminating evidence against some of the world's most powerful people, and they're doing it in broad daylight in front of the entire world.
Williams is locked in a room in an assisted living facility in New York. That's her. The only way I could interview her was to have a camera in the street because we can't get a camera in. She can't really have any visitors. She cannot go outside. She's been out twice in the last 30 days. She has no internet. She, and I think rightly says, she feels like a prisoner.
Terms of Wendy's guardianship seem to be extreme. I've spoke to her several months ago, and she just sounds like the same Wendy. Yes, is she quirky? Sure. Is she eccentric? Sure. She always has been.
And just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more shocking, everything shifted again. According to updates from Wendy Williams's legal side, a newly ordered medical evaluation has reportedly found no signs of frontotemporal dementia, which changes everything.
She does not have frontal lobal dementia. So that should be game, set, match.
And now, another voice is stepping in, adding fuel to an already explosive story. Gene Deal, once part of Sean Combs' inner circle, has come forward with claims that point directly at the reason Wendy Williams was pushed out. According to him, her downfall wasn't about any medical condition. It was about who she spoke on and what she was willing to...
See, what people don't understand about Puff is that he held the entertainment grip, especially for the people who was his former artists, in a chokehold. If you didn't do what he say do, if he didn't like you, you would never ever work for Bad Boy or anybody in the entertainment business again. He did it to Kirk Burroughs. You understand? He did it to Wendy Williams. He did it to a lot of people, bruh. So now her going back is just wanting to get food on her table, keep a roof over her head. Because nobody was probably telling her, yo, I can't work with you. I can't deal with you unless Puff say so. I'm not gonna work with you. I'm not gonna do anything, because they didn't want to make him mad because he had enough power in the business to stop her.
There's a pattern here, and once you see it, it's hard to ignore. According to Katt Williams, the moment someone becomes impossible to control, the system flips on them. Suddenly, narratives change, labels get attached, and one of the most damaging, being branded as unstable. He suggests this isn't random, it can be strategic. When massive contracts are involved, worth hundreds of millions, shifting that narrative can give companies an exit without paying what's owed. And that raises a bigger concern. Because if power can rewrite perception that easily, then losing control doesn't just cost you money, it can cost you everything.
In order for the type of ratings we need and attention to be on this thing. See, what I'm saying is, in business, nothing is coincidental, or you would be hearing who's losing money. In all of these situations, it's only the artist that's losing. Somebody makes big money. When these rappers get killed, not incidental. Somebody made $100 million and now don't have to talk to that artist or none of their crew, don't have to validate none of their contracts. Now only got to deal with the mama, only got to see her once a year, and it's over. And the money goes up and up and up. So they killed this $20 million guy, but they reaped $60 million in benefits.
Wow.
And they had some people from your city do it.
Wow.
I'm saying there's the good side and the bad side of these businesses.
But think about what you just think about what you just said. That's extremely thoughtful and powerful.
And if you think this pattern stops with one or two names, think again. Take Dave Chappelle. At the peak of his success, everything seemed locked in, massive deals, global recognition, and a future most artists would dream of. But according to this narrative, the moment he stepped outside expectations and refused to be controlled, everything shifted. He walked away from a deal reportedly worth hundreds of millions, and almost instantly, the public conversation around him changed. Labels started circulating, accusations followed, and the focus moved away from his talent to his personal life. And here's the deeper layer. When one voice is pushed out, another quietly takes that space. Even fans noticed. Majuan reaction summed it up perfectly. What happened to Dave felt wrong, like watching someone gifted and genuine get torn down for standing firm. Which leaves a chilling question. How many more stories like this are still unfolding behind the scenes?
You say that, but your
we
fans
take it
have
another
a
way.
difference of
We
opinion.
your fans. We think you
I
cold.
prove my points.
Well, that's why I said your fans have a difference of opinion.
But Dave Chappelle was decapitated in front of us. And until we deal with that, until we deal with the fact that a devout Muslim who doesn't eat bacon was accused of being a crackhead, until we establish the fact that they said that he went to Africa to smoke cocaine when we know they don't have running water and food over there, when they don't have paved roads over there. You saying he flew past Chicago and Miami and LA and New York and Detroit. You saying he went past Cleveland and Fort Pierce, Florida, and he went past Okeechobee and Oakland. You say he went to another country where they're not eating?
Right.
You talking about somebody who has a wife and children, 5 children, and lives on a farm, doesn't live here in Hollywood. You saying you convinced people that person was an insane crackhead? Wow. And he hasn't been on movies and TV for 8 years? Is that correct? Wow. Okay, then don't tell me about what you want to tell me about. I just watched you decapitate the king in front of me. And then act like he's supposed to catch up and be a regular comedian like everybody else. But no.
He didn't go for that.
That's not how it went. He was out there with us for 20 years. They called him Pilot Boy because he had 19 pilots in Hollywood and everybody passed on him and said his show wasn't worth it.
What do you think of
Then when he made $500 million, they said even though his contract said he should get half of it, they said he made too much for the contract to be valid, so we'll offer you 10% of what you made. You mean he made $500 million and they offered him 50? Yes. And he said, what do you think my fans are gonna say when they find out you offered me 10% of what I made you? And they said, your fans will believe that you're a crazy crackhead by the time you get home. And my nigga got on the flight in LA, and by the time he got to Ohio, it was so. And 8 years later, he hasn't been in a movie and or television. Is just now trying to do his real comeback at Radio City Music Hall.
And what makes all of this even more unsettling is that some of these claims aren't new at all. Years before recent headlines, back in 2017, Katt Williams was already speaking openly about what he believed was happening behind the scenes. He didn't hold back. According to him, real success in Hollywood often comes with a price, one that goes far beyond talent. He suggested that powerful figures weren't just shaping careers, but allegedly influencing much darker activities tied to control and exploitation. In those claims, he even pointed to names like Sean Combs and Jeffrey Epstein as central figures. Whether people believed him or not at the time, those statements are now being looked at very differently.
Everybody is a supplier. Epstein, Weinstein, like these guys knew what these extremists liked and provided it, and provided the way for you to to have $1 billion and not create a fantasy island type environment.
And when you zoom out, the picture starts connecting in ways. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just raise questions about one man, it exposed how deep certain networks might go. Reports around his associate Jean-Luc Brunel added even more intrigue, especially with claims that he was willing to cooperate in exchange for protection. What makes this even more controversial is the perception that key information never fully surfaced, leaving people wondering who was really being protected. And then came the shocking twist, his death in custody, which only fueled more speculation. At that point, it stops feeling like isolated incidents and starts looking like a much bigger system at play.
Has not existed throughout history.
Right. I mean, if I was going to run some global power organization, I would try to co-opt every single leader, try to suck for support, bring them out to wherever the fuck I have my big-ass meetings, fly everybody in private jets to talk about the climate crisis.
All organizations have to follow the same rules.
Yeah, that's wild.
Recruitment is an important facet of all.
We have to get some young global leaders.
Well, understand, this is the only reason that we can talk about these big Illuminati-like entities at this period of time. It's just because of time. Like, they aged out. Like, you can't get in new, so everybody got decrepit over there, and they can't exchange, really.
And just when it seems like the story couldn't stretch any further, another layer starts to emerge. There are growing claims that certain medical professionals tied to high-profile cases, like those involving Wendy Williams and Dave Chappelle, may have overlapping connections to a much wider network linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Investigations into Epstein's records have pointed to allegations of a network of doctors across the U.S. who were reportedly supported through donations, funding, and other benefits. In return, there are claims that sensitive patient information was shared, something that raises serious ethical concerns. One disturbing account even described a young girl receiving emergency medical attention under highly unusual circumstances, which only deepened the scrutiny around how far this influence may have reached. And that's what makes this part of the story especially chilling. Medicine is supposed to be a place of trust, one of the few systems people believe is protected from corruption. But if even that line can be crossed, then it forces a much bigger question. How much of this world is really independent, and how much of it is quietly controlled behind the scenes?
And this is an FBI file that says one of Epstein's, it says what appears to say BFs, best friends perhaps, Jean-Luc Brunel has, quote, helped get girls. He is wanting to cooperate. And it goes on to discuss a plan for that and that he's hired a lawyer and how that would work. And so these are notes that date all the way back to a period where Brunel was believed to have considered cooperating. If you haven't heard of him, if you haven't followed this case as closely, he's one of the key officials because he held himself out as a kind of modeling scout. He did, and that's debated over whether he was actually an alleged sex trafficker, but that was one of the tools they would use. He went into businesses that had arrangements with Epstein. He was on the flights a lot. So his name was one of those that had been around before.
And then there's another name that adds even more weight to the conversation, Chris Tucker. At one time, Katt Williams openly respected Chris for standing firm in his choices. Chris reportedly turned down what could have been one of the biggest roles of his career, simply because he didn't want to project an image he felt would negatively influence young audiences. But according to Katt's perspective, things didn't stay that simple. He suggests that after that decision, pressure started building, subtle at first, then harder to ignore, raising questions about how much control artists really have once they're inside the system. And that's where the story takes another uneasy turn.
This is a photo taken in Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. It seems to show a doctor performing a medical procedure on Mr. Epstein's dining room table. We looked through about 15,000 records from the Epstein files to understand how Jeffrey Epstein cultivated and rewarded a small circle of doctors as a means of control over the women in his orbit. Mr. Epstein dictated when these women got plastic surgery, even when they went to the gynecologist. And he could also take medical care away. In some cases, you also see the doctors help Jeffrey Epstein maintain that control over these women's lives. Here's one really striking example. Jeffrey Epstein is flying back from his island in the Virgin Islands to New York with a young woman who has suffered a really serious injury. He reaches out to somebody named Eva Dubin, a former girlfriend of his, and the founder of the Dubin Breast Center at Mount Sinai. And he says, "This woman fell off the ATV and needs stitches in her forehead. Can you organize?" She responds, "Okay, Jess Ting, a plastic surgeon at Mount Sinai, is standing by. Call me as soon as you land." And then you see the next day from Jeffrey Epstein, Dr. Ting put 35 stitches in her head, laid out on the dining room table. And that brings us back to this photo, which appears to be of Dr. Ting. Dr. Ting declined comment on this photo. When we talked to medical experts, they said, there's no way you do this if you were putting the patient's needs first. If you were doing that, you just take her to the hospital. There's much more equipment, there's many more people, the risk of infection is lower. The only reason you do this is if you were putting somebody else's needs first.
One of the country's most prominent physicians is in the Epstein files, and the emails look pretty damning. Dr. Peter Attia is a longevity doctor who is a New York Times bestselling author and the host of a popular podcast. Here's an alleged email from Dr. Peter Attia to Leslie Groff, who was one of Epstein's assistants, and it says, "No, thank you so much. See you next time. Hopefully JE in town when I'm back in 2 weeks. I go into JE withdrawal when I don't see him." And this email apparently between Dr. Attia and Jeffrey Epstein with the subject, "Got a fresh shipment. You the biggest problem with becoming friends with you? The life you lead is so outrageous and yet I can't tell a soul." To which Jeffrey E. replies, "Afraid not." And there's another email with language that I don't want to share with you here today that is just not good. One person is reporting that there are 175 pages of documents with Dr. Attia in the Epstein files. Now, I don't know Dr. Attia, I've never met him, but I did not have this on my 2026 bingo card.
Another name that Katt mentioned was industry veteran.
And then, just when things couldn't get more controversial, another moment surfaced that raised even more questions. Images began circulating showing Chris Tucker alongside Bill Clinton on a flight connected to Jeffrey Epstein. The trip itself was described publicly as a humanitarian visit to Africa, with other high-profile names like Kevin Spacey also reportedly present. But once those connections came to light, the narrative quickly shifted from charity to scrutiny. Because when influential figures, private flights, and unanswered questions intersect, people start looking a lot closer at the full picture. To be clear, simply being on a flight linked to Jeffrey Epstein doesn't automatically prove anything, but context matters. Because when you start hearing accounts tied to those same flights, it changes how people look at the situation. In a 2015 segment by Inside Edition, a former flight attendant described what she claimed to have witnessed aboard Epstein's private jet, saying that young girls were frequently present during trips involving high-profile passengers. And that's where the concern deepens. Multiple testimonies from crew members have been cited in discussions around who was on board during certain flights, including references connected to Chris Tucker. Again, none of this confirms direct involvement. But when similar accounts keep surfacing from different sources, it becomes harder for people to simply dismiss the pattern.
Epstein's jet on September 2nd, 2002.
You knew Jeffrey Epstein, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. We flew Bill Clinton and a lot of different. That was a humanitarian trip to Africa, And I met him on that trip because it was his plane. I didn't know who plane we was getting on, but it was a whole bunch of dignitary people. We was with a delegation. And yeah, I met him, and you know, you don't know people, what they do in their private lives. So yeah.
But tell me this, Chris. You was on this private plane, and you could tell that it was a private plane because they called it, was it Lolita Express?
Oh yeah, it was a private plane. Yes. Oh yes.
But wait a minute. You didn't never go to that island, did you?
No.
And when you step back and connect everything, Dave Chappelle's decision starts to look very different. He didn't just walk away from money, he walked away from what he believed came attached to it. In a later conversation with Oprah Winfrey, Dave broke it down in a way that stuck with people. He described what he called a trap, using the image of a baboon grabbing salt and refusing to let go, even though that's exactly what keeps it captured. For him, that salt wasn't literal. It was the fame, the fortune, the deal everyone else would chase without hesitation. And that's the part most people miss. Because the real power move wasn't taking the offer, it was having the awareness to release it. While others held on and got pulled deeper in, Dave made a choice that most wouldn't even consider. He let go, and in doing that, he kept control.
Wealth was so vast, you know, the fact that he had this fleet of planes. We've heard a lot about the Lolita Express. What happened on the Lolita Express?
Everything that happened on the Lolita Express and his other planes was the same thing that happened in his bedrooms and the massage rooms, on the beach, wherever we were. They did not stop because we're in the air. 95% of the time, there was always sex involved. Jeffrey couldn't take a 2-hour flight without having to ejaculate. Like, that's how sick this man was.
How did you live every day? How did you get on board that plane? How did you live knowing you're going off to New York or to the island or to wherever you were about to be trafficked to? You must have been a ball of dread and anxiety.
I was horrified, I was sad, I was angry, I was disgusted. I was a shell, and the only way that I could cope with what I was going through was, taking Xanax. And Xanax is like an anti-anxiety tablet, but it also, it took away that feeling of anger, sadness. It made me feel numb. It was a numbing tablet, and it helped me cope with what was going on at the time. It took a lot of people involved. It took doctors, psychiatrists, gynecologists, dentists. All these people knew what was going on.
Any other names together. The police are out on stage. They've cut to commercial. You didn't see what happened. By the time they come out, people have been removed. It goes on. It's certain ways things are handled when it's not intentional. When things go smoothly, but they seem chaotic, that means there was forethought and a plan. Somebody, even if it looks like, Janet Jackson just had a wardrobe malfunction. There's no such thing.
Correct.
I don't care who you blaming.
I believe that.
Somebody benefited. Yeah. So in all of these situations, there's a business involved and there's real money involved, and somebody's benefiting from this thing that looks like, oh, that just happened. Nah, no way. No way.
Comedian Dave Chappelle left tens of millions of dollars on the table when he walked away from his popular Comedy Central show. A lot of people wondered what the hell was he thinking, and that's a quote. Chappelle says he had,
he was thinking.
or whether he was thinking. A lot of people ask that question. Chappelle says he had a crisis of conscience and stood up for his integrity as an artist. He explained to us how stepping out of the spotlight helped him avoid getting caught in a trap.
It's so much bigger than money, though, Dave. It's so much bigger than money.
Oh, no, it was bigger than money. But you know what? I watched one of these nature shows one time, and they were talking about how a bushman finds water when it's scarce. And they do what's called a salt trap. I didn't know this. Apparently, baboons love salt.
Okay.
So they put a lump of salt in a hole, and they wait for the baboon. The baboon comes, sticks his hand in the hole, grabs the salt. Salt makes his hand bigger, and he's trapped. He can't get his hand out. Now, if he's smart, all he does is let go of the salt. Baboon doesn't want to let go of the salt. Then the bushman just comes, takes the baboon, throws him in the cage, and gives him all the salt he wants. And then the baboon gets thirsty. The bushman lets him out the cage. The first place the baboon runs to is water. Bushman follows him, and they both drink to their fill. And in that analogy, I felt like the baboon. But I was smart enough to let go of the salt.
Isn't that a great analogy?
What an
guys?
analogy.
I know. He's very, very thoughtful. And
when you really sit with all of this, it's hard not to see the bigger picture forming. If even a fraction of what Katt Williams has been saying holds weight, then this story goes far beyond a handful of names. It starts to raise deeper questions about how influence operates behind the scenes, who gets shielded, who gets pushed out, and why certain voices suddenly get dismissed the moment they stop cooperating. Because the pattern keeps repeating. And that's what makes it impossible to ignore. If this breakdown made you think a little differently, stay tapped in and don't miss what's coming next. These stories are moving fast, and every new detail seems to open another door. Now I want to hear from you. Coincidence? Or something much bigger?